of Barbados to the United Nations, his thoughts and his observations on his new post, especially after a busy schedule with UNGA, the United Nations General Assembly, and the just concluded UNCTAD 15. And she graces your screens on Mondays and Thursdays on Face It and Fix It. We'll find out what makes her tick, from where does her empathy come. That's right, we're linking up with communications specialist and CEO of Haigh Communications and my sister from another mother, Anne Haig. Now, remember, you can watch our stream on Facebook and YouTube and share your comments and questions in real time at CBC Barbados. Ambassador Jackman joins us after the break. Don't forget to change back the screen. Oh, good, thank you. Ambassador Jackman is one of these individuals who is like so busy that sometimes just to pin him down, you know, it's fun in itself. I remember when we were trying to balance the time difference in China, because of course he was our ambassador to China before becoming our permanent representative to Barbados, of Barbados to the United Nations rather. So very, very busy gentleman. Thank you so much for joining me this morning, Ambassador. It's great to see you.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Peta. It's lovely to see you again.
Now, this transition from China and a 12-hour difference to one, how does one hit the ground running when it comes to a change like that? Did you have an opportunity to take a pause and breathe, or did you dive first, head first, right in?
I did have a brief interval between Beijing and New York, which I happily spent at home in Barbados, and that was a great help in making the transition. The other thing, of course, is that when I arrived in New York, my colleagues who were here at the mission really made the transition, I don't want to say seamless because it's really impossible for a transition like that to be seamless, but made it very as easy as you could expect by helping me to see the areas where we had traditionally focused, the areas where I would be required to focus. So the team here in New York really made the transition quite smooth.
Mm-hmm. Did you come with a mandate, or have you created, along with government and the Prime Minister, your mandate?
The mandate was quite clear from the outset, and the Prime Minister, my Minister of Foreign Affairs, have made very clear for some time now what are our principal objectives within the UN system in particular, but I suppose you could argue within the broader framework of our foreign policy. Here in the UN, one of the key thrusts of Barbados's activity today, but under my predecessors and over the last 2 or 3 decades, has been to try to shape the international system in a way which is more responsive to the needs of small states like ours. International politics is largely shaped by hard power and big countries, and since Errol Barrow was at the UN in 1966 making the case for Barbados's independence, setting out the principle that we would be friends of all but satellites of none, the thrust of our diplomacy here has been to say to our partners, to say to the international system, this system is valuable, but it must respond to the needs of those of us who do not have navies, armies, and the kind of hard power which the larger countries have. That is the thrust of our diplomacy here in New York, and has always been and will continue to be. It will take different shapes, different expressions at different times, but that is the underlying principle, I think.
And mammoth budgets to go with it as well. When you consider, though, the size of Barbados, 166 square miles, and we always hear them speak of us punching above our weight, when we consider how many people have viewed our Prime Minister's speech at the UN, and you realize that this voice is reaching the globe, do you think that at this time, more than any other, we're finally being heard when it comes to SIDS and the problems that we face, especially climate change?
I would say, and I must agree with you, of course, that the Prime Minister's voice literally echoed through the chambers of the UN a couple of weeks ago, and in many respects is still so doing. I would say that in a way we have reached a culmination of a decades-long argument that we've been making for the recognition of the particular interests, the particular vulnerabilities of small island developing states. And Barbados has just co-hosted, virtually hosted, the 15th session of the UN Conference on Trade and Development. You couldn't want a more explicit and clear demonstration of both the agenda-setting power that small states still have and the response of the international system to that agenda-setting power. And so, yes, this is an important moment. There will be several other moments between now and the end of the year, the beginning of next year, where we really have an opportunity to help the international community crystallize, both from a conceptual perspective and, even more importantly, from an operational perspective, how it is going to address the special needs of small island developing states. We've just had UNCTAD. In about 6 weeks or so, there will be the much talked about Conference of the Parties of the Convention on Climate Change, COP26. There will be early next year an important conference on least developed countries. There will be a ministerial meeting of the World Trade Organization at the end of this year. There will be, in the middle of next year, a big conference on oceans and sustainable development. This is really an important moment that countries like Barbados have to seize in order to make sure that our voice not only is heard because it's heard, but is taken into account in the decisions that are being made in the halls of power internationally.
On the ground, what are you hearing away from the cameras and away from the media when you have your, I don't know, off-camera moments chatting with one another? And what are you hearing? Because yes, climate change is top of mind, but there's also hunger, there's poverty, there's COVID, you know, all of these things that in some countries they're dealing with armed conflict and chaos. What are you hearing on the ground?
Well, this is, I said in some ways that this was a propitious moment for small island developing states to make their case and to have their case heard, but there's no doubt that this is a very difficult moment in the international system. Uh, COVID has wreaked all sorts of havoc on individual lives, on livelihoods, on the population in countries, and on the relationships between countries. Um, and I think there is a sense that uh, we must find a way to come together, to use the tools of the international system better, to create some new tools which better reflect the current circumstances. And so I think countries here in the UN are looking for ways out of these difficult circumstances. And in this regard, and I'm going to mention briefly the Prime Minister's statement at the general debate of the General Assembly a few weeks ago. In this regard, there are some big ideas also out there. And one of them that the Prime Minister referred to and endorsed very strongly is something called Our Common Agenda, which is a report, a compendium, a document prepared by the UN Secretary General, which attempts to pull together the many, many different strands of interest which states have in the international society, and to create, as the title says, a common agenda by which we can move forward, by which we can address things like the pandemic, global issues to do with global public goods, issues to do with peace and security, and of course issues to do with sustainable development. So we're looking towards this common agenda as helping Barbados, the Caribbean, small island developing states, but the international community more globally to find a path out of the difficult circumstances in which we find ourselves. But this will require leadership from all sides, from big, rich, powerful countries, from medium-sized countries, from smaller countries. It will require the involvement of the private sector, the involvement of the civil society. It will require a kind of a whole of world effort in order to get beyond these difficult times.
Okay, we're going to take a look at the just concluded UNCTAD and your thoughts and your observations on that when we come back. We're chatting this morning with Ambassador François Jackman, who is the permanent representative of Barbados to the United Nations. And Ambassador, your personal observations and your thoughts about the just concluded UNCTAD 15.
Well, Peta, I think the UNCTAD 15 illustrates one of the things that perhaps we don't realize, we don't explain, we don't talk about enough, and which is the power of diplomacy and foreign relations. Often people think that diplomacy is a lot of talking and a lot of documents and rather a lot of hot air. I suppose there is rather a lot of talking, that's true, but it has concrete, practical effects. And before I talk about UNCTAD, I'd just like to say something briefly about COVID and the role that foreign policy, foreign affairs, and diplomacy has played in Barbados's ability to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. We are in a difficult place right now, but if you think about how we have constructed our response to COVID, it has been deeply intertwined with the international system. We have, because of our relations with international organizations, with friendly countries, we have been able to get access to vaccines. We have been able to get support for our public health system through the presence of nurses and medical personnel from other countries. Without the international connection, without the foreign policy, without the diplomacy, our response to COVID would have been far more difficult. So, to be sure, there is a lot of talking. Diplomats do go to dinners and do talk and do write long reports, which sometimes don't get the attention we would like them to. But things like the COVID response demonstrate the actual results of these relationships. If we did not have excellent relationships with the WHO, if we did not have excellent relationships, for example, with both the United States and China, we would not be getting the kind of support that we have received over the last almost 2 years in our fight against the pandemic. So having said that, I think UNCTAD illustrates, as I said, how it is possible for even small countries to shape the international agenda in ways which are more reflective of our interests. The document that came out of the UNCTAD 15 meeting is a clear pathway for a reshaping of the international trading system in a way which better reflects our interests, which creates a more level playing field for all of us, and which mitigates against some of the, frankly, unfair practices of which small island developing states in particular, developing countries more broadly, have been the victims. So UNCTAD really is a sign that we can achieve significant progress even with the limited means that we have. You used the expression punching above our weight. There are many ways of thinking about this, but to be sure, when you are able to bring the attention of the international community to our particular interests and to also generalize our interests so that they are shared by all, understood by all, you have, I think, what the government was attempting to achieve by offering to host UNCTAD in the first place. You have a result which shows that small island developing states, countries like Barbados, developing countries more broadly, have a stake in the international system and have an ability to shape it in their interests. And it is an ongoing dialogue, it's an ongoing battle sometimes. Not everyone agrees with how we see things. That's the nature of the international system, that's the nature of diplomacy. But it is our job to continually make this argument and to find as many different ways as we can to make the argument and derive the results.
I think for me, there were two things which came out of UNCTAD personally, was the fact that more than ever, it underscored for me how we are basically all the same. It's just in terms of size and economies and so on, but we are going through the same issues and concerns and challenges. And then the second thing for me was what you call the power of diplomacy and talking, yes, which is, I always ask, at the end of the day, after you have talked and thrashed it out, does what you're in effect doing in the end have any teeth? Will there be a result of this call to action, or I think they phrased it as a clarion call to work? But at the end of the day, will it achieve something? And for me, I think this time more than ever, I have more of a hopeful, positive feeling about it. How do you see that? And do you disagree or agree with what I've seen?
I completely agree, and I think it goes back to the point we were making at the beginning, which is that when these are not easy things. States have really entrenched interests, and although sometimes we in many respects we share many things in common, we also have diverging interests. But when we bring states together, and not just states, but also other actors from civil society and the private sector together, it is often easier to see what we have in common and how we can go forward on these things where we share a common interest and a common perspective. And I want to point to two things specifically, not necessarily directly related to UNCTAD, although UNCTAD certainly had its word to say about this. The two things are climate finance and the multidimensional vulnerability index. We've been talking about these two things for a long time. We have been saying for a long time that small island developing states in particular, developing countries more broadly, need finance in order to mitigate and in particular to adapt to the consequences of climate change, which has been caused by others. We are getting closer and closer to a point, I think, and I think this is a judgment that many others share, we are getting closer and closer to a point where the promises and the talking that we have been hearing for some time are going to be translated into something more concrete, more measurable, more quantifiable, namely funds, actual
Hallelujah.
dollars and cents with which to make these measures towards adaptation and mitigation real. Mm-hmm. Money to build things which will help us adapt to a different climate environment. Hallelujah. The other one I just mentioned is the multi-dimensional vulnerability index. Again, we have been talking about the vulnerability index for small island developing states for some time now. The Prime Minister has been making clarion calls about this. What will the index do? The index will allow countries like ours to be measured in a way which allows us to have access to concessional finance, which, because of the GDP per capita measurement, we cannot have access to. If we are successful in implementing this measure, it means that more funds will be coming to countries like ours to do the things we need to do in order to reach our sustainable development goals and to mitigate and adapt to climate change. These are the practical results of all of this talking, which I know sometimes may appear a little bit abstract and distant, but it produces, in some cases, literally concrete results.
Agreed. I think that because the view has been that the talking has been going on for so long. I mean, this was the 76th session of the UN General Assembly, and UNCTAD 15, that some of the concerns and challenges discussed you've heard discussed time and time again. But I think that this time, more than any other, personally, and reading up on it, there is more hope. on a positive note. And in 6 weeks, you know, when you will be moving towards that, the climate change conference and so on, then I think that there's a feeling, there's a positive feeling. And I thank you very much for joining us today, Ambassador. I hope that you continue to stay safe and stay well, and you continue to let us punch above our weight, because we are only as good as the human resources that we have, I think, and you and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you are some really great resources that we have right now. Congratulations on UNCTAD 15 and its success. Looking forward to more. You stay safe.
Thank you, Peta. All the best.
All the best to you too, sir. And coming up next after the break, we're going to get an opportunity to find out just what makes the host of Face It and Fix It tick. Looking forward to that when we come back. You know, when you get an opportunity to meet someone and you think to yourself, like, I have known her all my life, and really you haven't, but it's just something that there's a synergy there. That happened when we were thinking of creating a new talk show on CBC, and I got an opportunity to meet the lady whose name and voice I'd known before I knew the person. I say all that to say this. Welcome to the link up, Joy Anne Haig.
Thank you, Peta, Alleyne, my mother, my sister from another mother.
Sister from another mother, yes.
Yes.
So tell me and tell us about Joyanne, because when we know you from, you know, that very important water agency in the past, and then we also know you down by the river in the radio call-in program. But who's Joy Anne Haig? Tell me about her.
Well, just a simple girl, originally from Barks Road, Hall, and came out of the family of my mom has 7 children, and good morning, Mom, and if hope you're watching, I know you are, and a lot of respect for my mom, because, you know, raising 7 children even back then and what it is now, it is very difficult. But I'd say that I am just a humble girl. I know where I came from. I know where I want to go, and I'm very patient to a lot of things, and that came from being a mother, which I will expand on a little bit later if I have the time.
Yeah, but so, okay, You are one of seven. So you have siblings. Where are you in the birth order?
Second last child.
Ooh.
Last girl, but second last.
Last
child.
girl.
Last girl. My mom calls me. For those of you who may not know, because those of you who know me as Kitten, you know me from way back. But my mom still calls me Kitten, and because she said I had eyes like a cat. I don't know if I still do. Some people look at me and say, well, you're no longer a kitten, you're a big cat. And I'm like, okay. But yeah, I mean, a lot has happened to me, and everybody has their story. Everybody. We all have a story. No one is without. And so with me, and I can go back as far as just the Ward Authority, or even before that as a teenager. I remember having won a lottery. First person to win a lottery on this island. I was only 17, and at Commonwealth School. And it started from then. I had my own little business, and I moved out from home early. I never went back. I think my mom's happy about that. and got married, divorced, and have two beautiful girls, Sky and Mistral. Mistral is studying in England, psychology, and Sky, as we all know, my daughter Sky has Down syndrome, and she's home watching. Peta, I will tell you this, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on your show. She watches your show more than mine, and she's more a link-up type of girl. So this morning she's reminding me of Peta, like if you're her friends. And she knows say Peta Alleyne, Peta on, you link up today. So and she encourages me. What really pushes me though to maybe help, and I think this happened more after Sky's birth. We had a lot of problems with getting her heart fixed in this country back then because we don't have a pediatric cardiologist, or should I say, we don't practice surgical pediatric cardiology here, and you have to wait until you're a certain weight and so on and so forth, and it was difficult. But I got her there to North Shore University Hospital. I'm actually quite happy to see the relationships growing again with QEH, and I think recently Northwell Health, and what relationships we can build, because it's very difficult when you can't get health care here. And I'm not saying we have a bad system, we have a great system, but there's some things we just cannot do. And Sky was the recipient of heart surgery in 2000, and she was the first person with a disability in this country to get that surgery overseas. And I'm proud of that. It was a big fight, but we got there.
Do you think that having Sky and, where you came from, that is all part of that well of empathy that you have? Because there are some people that could have happened to and basically could have just shrugged it off and just been completely narcissistic and gone on and moved on and away, but you decided that you wanted to help. Where did that passion come from?
I think Sky brought out a lot more in me. Mistral too. Mistral, if you're watching in England, and I know you are, don't feel left out. But I think Sky had a lot more to do with it, more so than Missy. Because I had Mistral at 20 years old, very young. I had Sky at 29, going 30, obviously knowing a little bit more. I will tell you this though, I've learned a lot in terms of who I help and how I help. Because in the beginning, I just want to do everything. I want to do what Oprah did for America. I'm going to do for Barbados. I'm going to do for the Caribbean, and I'm just going to do. And then I realized that I was just getting so tired, and I wasn't looking after myself. It was always about somebody else. And then I realized I need to slow down. And then, of course, meeting some people who would not necessarily be candidates for assistance. In other words, people who want to trick the system. I've learned that the hard way too. And so I realized, okay, you can empathize with people, but make sure you get all the facts, get the whole story. Not just from them, from other people. And nowadays, and people call me, they can tell you, I'm asking 100 questions before we dive in and we do anything, which gives us credibility for myself and the company that I run. Because I want to be able to go to somebody and say, look, Mary, Jane, Sue, Tom, Dick, and Harry needs your help. And they must know that I have done my due diligence, and if I say this is what it is, then this is what it is. And that takes time to build up credibility, so I certainly don't want to assist anyone who wants to trick the system. So my empathy dies right there, I can tell you that, for sure.
You're thus looking at it from one side, but the system itself might also not need tricking, it might need tweaking, it might need changing a little. I think that over the years it's not kept pace with the actual life changes that are happening within the country to its citizens, and so a little antiquated, a little too many hoops and too many people that you have to go through before you can. Yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people hurting right now. I can tell you that with COVID, this entire pandemic. As we always say, it's sucked the air, the oxygen out of the atmosphere, and leaving us all, feeling very tired and very drained, and killing us slowly. And when I say killing us, not literally, but mentally, and even physically, depending on the nature of how you handle your mental stress. We all know it can impact you physically.
I think that we, and I say we now in the media, we have, one of our mandates is to inform, and we have to get it right. And therefore we have to also educate. That's another part of our mandate. I leave entertain at the end, but basically to inform and to educate. We also have to do that for ourselves. So how do you find the time in the midst of all that you do to educate yourself and inform yourself on what is happening on the ground?
Well, I'm more of a grassroots kind of girl. So yes, we watch TV and we get our information from credible sources, but I like to be on the ground amongst people. Like on Monday, I was on a block. I wouldn't mention where, but people go like, Joanne is on a block. Yes, I went on a block to talk to a group of guys about the vaccine, but not only about the vaccine, about where we are now, about money and about life, what we refer to as high reasoning. So, and in a couple hours, about 2 hours, they got in my car, put on their mask. I had on my mask, I'm vaccinated. And I took them to St. Philip Primary School to get vaccinated. But that was their choice after a conversation. And I'm big on communication, but not what some people may see it as a script. I'll put out the information. You gotta look and see, well, if I put out this information, how many people is it reaching? And there's some people who are just happy to say, well, I put it on the air. But which station, how many, who's hearing, what time, and do we need only a script? Do we need to have some people out on the ground? Do we need to communicate it in the church? Do we need to go to on the block? We even have our sex workers, Peta, that they're people too. Homeless people. How are we getting our messages out to everybody? So for me, it's more, I do a combination of ads with my company, but I'm very much more the grassroots type of girl. And I'm with the Prime Minister on the each one, reach one. And not only just for a pandemic, but for a lot of things that we have to do in life.
Agreed. And that getting out there on the ground and so on, and meeting the people where they are. Someone said that as well, and I'm trying to say, but meeting, people where they are is very, very critical. But how has the accumulation or the acquiring of this information, how has it affected your outlook on life?
Well, it doesn't help going through a pandemic at 51, going 52, because menopause is probably happening as well. So that's a bad combination. So you gotta talk to yourself a lot. And people say, well, you know, Joy, if you talk to yourself, you're answering back yourself, you know something is wrong. But you literally have to answer yourself back by remaining calm and not panicking. Because a lot of what's happening right now is being driven by fear. And those who want to vaccinate, that's being driven by fear. Those who don't want to vaccinate, driven by fear. Everybody's scared. So for me, I try my best to remain calm. I lose my cool a little bit, but not for long. I must say recently, when I come home and then Sky is asking me a question, I don't know if it's God talking to me, but as much as I know in my mind I want to shout, what comes out of my mouth is, yes, dear, yes, hon. And I'm thinking, you know, I need a breather. Because it's the company, it's your daughter, it's different things, it's people calling you, you're dealing with different contracts, so you put your mind in one zone for one thing, half an hour later you're into something different. Then of course you got your personal things to do and just shop. I heard Dr. Ford say the other day that he don't know when last he went to a bank or even pay a bill. And as a doctor, that must be very stressful on him doing all those things. But I try my best to take a little breather, and I watch a lot of Netflix when I can in between.
I like dry bar comedy myself. I find that a great way to, like, you know, stop the world for a little bit. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, let's find out just how Joyanne is dealing as a communication specialist with getting the message out there about COVID-19. We're chatting with colleague and communication specialist Joyanne Haig. And Joyanne, you know, when you consider that this pandemic has affected so many people around the globe and here at home, how do you process, one, that information, but two, how do you leave it behind and just deal with, you know, mental health, as you said, and finding ways to self-care rather than go a little batty?
Well, I need to do more self-care because I've got one or two bad habits that I'm trying to get rid of. That's one. Two, it is hard to not to internalize things, because imagine you get a lot, I get a lot of calls, a lot of concerns through this show. I even still get calls about water. Even though I'm not a water authority, you're in a supermarket, you get stopped. You're in your car, you're sitting in traffic, Joanne, you know, I'm trying to call you, you know, that type of thing. And you want to find time to deal with it, and you try hard to help them. And the first thing I normally say to people is like, okay, I'm not a politician. I can't promise you anything. I will try my best, and I do. And when I tell you I'm going to try my best, I try hard. And some days I feel really disappointed if I can't get something done because someone is waiting for me to make a change or to help them make that change. And that bothers me a lot, and I probably take it on a little bit more than I should, but I just can't help it. But I find that recently I pray a lot, not a Christian, but I pray a lot, and I do believe in God. But I've asked God, you know, recently to help me, show me who I have to help, and show me who I have to leave for somebody else. And that way, if I have to say I can't at this time, I don't feel any way about it. I used to. I never wanted to say no to anybody. You know, I was always okay, okay, okay. That has changed because, and with the help of God, that has changed. But in this pandemic, it can overwhelm you if you allow it to. Recently, Peta, I can tell you another radio station has been playing Christmas music. I am in the Christmas zone. And every day I've got a list. I pull down part of the house. And I encourage people to find things to take your mind off of this pandemic, not to drop your guard when you go out and not wear a mask, sanitize, or vaccinate. But for me, it's Christmas music. I pull down, I can tell a lie, I stepping over things inside of the house. I think I nearly tripped up this morning and so did Skype. But we grew up in that tradition. My mom pulled down the entire house. I say every year I'm not doing it, but then I'm doing it. So I'm looking forward to that. But I also want to mention something, Peta, if you don't mind, about your interview. Excellent interview just now you had with His Excellency François. We communicate so much. We talk a lot in this country, worldwide. And one of the things with Haigh Communications that we try to do is we do communication and implementation. Because, as he said, a lot of things are just hot air. If you just like this. And this is why you got to be careful when you're communicating. If you don't action it, if you don't take it one step at a time and do something, then people are tired of hearing you. For me, I would go into a company quickly and I go like, okay, there are 5 of you in here. One of you got to answer the phone, the next one got to type, the next one got to process the check, the next one got to post it. What do you check and post? So I go back here, you answer the phone. Yes, mistress, I get the call. Did you whatever? Oh, you is the body who will process the check. In other words, break it down. Don't tell me that you can't find the problems in your organization without communication, but you're communicating what they have to do, but you need to find the bottlenecks in your organization and get rid of them or work around them. Sorry to put it that way.
But that was a nice segue into face it and fix it, because the fix it part, I think, yeah, it was a phrase that we heard from the late Owen Arthur, but you gotta face your challenges.
You have to face and fix them.
And fix them.
And fix them doesn't mean perfection. It means easing, doing something that would ease your mind to make your life a little bit better. And that's all I try to do with the show, and I want to do. And I'm looking forward to 1 or 2 things that we're going to be doing, so stay tuned on this show because we will be making a few people happier, I would like to think. But the other thing too, Peta, is in the Bible, you remember this story, the Tower of Babel. And this is where I bring the analogy into communications. When they wanted to build this tower to see, if they can get up to God, and he decided that they were all going to speak different tongues, so they don't get to build the tower anymore. This buddy didn't know who wanted sand and bricks. And so the moral of that is, if you cannot communicate, you cannot operate at all. It stops. And I use that all the time as a way to explain the importance of being able to communicate and marry it with implementation and operations.
And another critical part of communication, which we often tend to leave out, is the aspect of listening. You gotta listen. You cannot make assumptions. You've got to hear So therefore, you've got to communicate. You've got to talk, but you've also got to listen. And Joanne, I have been enjoying our journey on Face It and Fix It, truthfully. Being able to make a difference and to bring the issues to the people. And it's good to know that they're listening. They're not calling in a lot,
Yeah,
which is interesting.
yeah.
But
we
they
get
are
calls.
listening
But
because
the funny
you-
thing, we get calls, and I get calls after the show. I get all these
Afterwards,
WhatsApps,
it's
and
like-
they don't want to talk. And
Yeah.
and if I may use this opportunity to
Sure.
report that the lady who was evicted is now in her home. We got the new home for her. The
Excellent.
rent has been paid for 1 year. New fridge, new stove, second-hand dining room set, a little better than mine and yours for sure. So good morning to her and the 3 children. They're all
great.
settled. The schools have been changed to accommodate
That's
the new
good.
area. All of that was done through the show, and I'm very grateful again to those
Right.
who came forward.
And we've got lots more
Yes.
helping to come.
Yes.
That's not grammatically correct.
No, but that's all right.
You know what I mean.
People want to understand you. I think that was important. I know Sandy Campbell would not be happy.
Yeah,
for me to be
right.
saying that.
Lots more helping.
Exactly.
Lot
Sandy
more
will be
help.
correcting me for sure.
will be coming your way. Thank you so much, Diane.
Thank
See you
you.
on Monday.
See you on Monday.
I know we'll be taking a look at the importance of the
Labor.
HR community with businesses and so on, and that mandate for vaccines. But we will discuss that on
Yes,
Monday.
and I want to
so
thank you,
much.
Peter.
You're welcome.
Love you, love you, love you. Thank you so
you
much.
have a great weekend. Stay
Thank
safe.
you. Okay.
And thank you for joining me today. It's a short version of the link up. I almost said Face It and Fix It, but it's a short version of the link up today. Coming up next on CBC TV 8 will be the President's Chat from the Caribbean Development Bank with our Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Amor Motley. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe.